going to look at how to modify our environment in Linux, in particular the shell environment, the terminal environment that we're using. Why would you ever want to do this? Well, customization, you can customize things to make it the way you want. If you like pretty colors on the terminal, you can make pretty colors. If you like aliases, which we'll talk about, you can make aliases. So it makes things easier. You can, with aliases, with different commands that you put in these files, you can make things easier. You can make your workflow a lot faster, that sort of thing. So a quick overview, and we'll look at some of the commands that are related to customization and the shell. First one is print env or env. They both do the same thing. If we look right here, env, it gives us our environment variables that have been set. So here's some of the environment variables. You have a shell, and so these are variables or information that the operating system uses to keep track of various things. Anyway, the language that we're using, our home directory, what terminal we're using, the user that's currently logged in, some of those things. So that's the first one. And I guess set, in fact, set gives us a lot more. I think actually env gives us the shell variables, and those are variables set by the shell, whereas set shows us the environment variables and the shell variables together. So they pretty much do the same thing. Largely they're indistinguishable. You can see a lot of code there. We don't really care, but eventually, and in fact, if I were to let's just pipe this to more, you can see some of that same information that we just looked at. So interesting. So those are shell variables. Now, why do I care? Well, we can look at some of these shell variables and print them out. We can use them later in scripts. We can customize them. We can create our own shell variables. So let's say I want a shell variable called animal, and we'll set that equal to chicken. And then echo animal, or we can say set and grep for animal. We can see that that is in now one of my environment variables. So we could use that later on in a script or something if we wanted to. So we can create, we can modify, we can update environment variables. Command is used for exporting our environment so that subsequent commands can make use of that environment. We don't use it very often in this class, and so that's all I'll say about that now. Alias allows us to provide a shortened word to reference another command, and we'll look at some of that in just a moment. So you can see aliases by entering the word alias without anything else. So if I switch back here and I say alias, I have a couple of them. They're already built in, it looks like. So if I do LL, it's a shortened form of LS minus ALF. And we'll build some aliases in the next video. So switch back here. So you can see some aliases there. P, that's my, every time I type the letter P, if I've set that, it would do the pwd command, and then followed by the ls minus cf. Or I can say alias foo, and anytime I type the word foo, it would then echo out hello. And we'll do some of that later. One more thing is various session types exist for our shell. The first type we have is a login shell. Now, a login shell is the type of shell that executes anytime you are prompted to log in, anytime you type in a username or password. So, for example, when you SSH in, or when you are at a virtual terminal. A non-login shell, this is the type of shell that executes when you open a new terminal from your desktop. So you'll click on the icon and say terminal. Those are some examples of those type of shells. Now, why do we care? Well, depending on what type of shell we are running will determine the startup, or I should say the files that will execute when that shell opens. So for a login shell, it follows this format. First, we will go look to see if there's anything in etc profile, which is a global file for all users. Now, I can show you that. There's not, at our level, there's not much that we really care about there, but you could read through that with some if statements and that sort of thing. But we could, for example, put our aliases in there, and it would be available on the whole system. A .bash profile in our home directory, that's an individual user can create that, and anytime they open a login shell, it would execute the commands in that file. Bash underscore login, it would then subsequently look for that file if the bash underscore profile is not found. And finally, it will then look for a dot profile if neither of the two above are found, and that's the default for Ubuntu. A bash logout, these are the commands that are run when logging out. So I flip back to my shell. Let's see what I have. Here's my commands, and this is a brand new install. I guess I have done some Vim stuff, but it created a bash history to save all my commands. Bash logout, let's see what happens there, because I didn't put anything in there. So bash logout, it does some weird command there when I log out, and a profile, it does a sequence of commands there when I log in on a login shell. And we'll look at some of these commands in a second in the next video. But the last thing I want to say is for the non-login shell, it will go look for a etc bash.bashrc, which is our global for all users, and otherwise it will look in the home directory for a .bashrc. And you can see I didn't have one of those. We'll experiment with those in the next video.